Chapter 12. Dana pushed up beside me. Jamie, what's wrong? I pointed to a bracelet near the bottom of the display case. Look, it's... My heart pounded so hard I could barely talk. I waved to the young woman down at the end of the long table. She was talking to the woman behind the socks table. Hi, can I see a bracelet? She came walking over slowly. She wore a fleece jacket over a long black skirt. She had a red socks cap pulled backward over long, straight, coppery hair that tumbled down her back. My name is Melissa. Did you want to see something? She pulled out a ring of keys from her jacket pocket. That silver bracelet, I said. The one with the tiny blue jewels? That's a nice one, she said. She opened the display case, reached down the row of bracelets and pulled it out. Then she rolled it around in her hand, examining it before she handed it to me. I took it and held it up for Dana. Don't you see? It's the same design as the amulet. Dana squinted at it. A strong gust of wind once again blew over the rack of vintage jeans at the end of the aisle. I felt more cold raindrops in the wind. Dana nodded. Yeah, it looks a lot like the amulet, the way the jewels are arranged in the silver. I stared at it a while longer. I felt a tingling at the back of my neck. I turned to Melissa. Can you tell me anything about this bracelet? She took it from me and studied it. Well, I can tell you that it's very old. How old? I asked. 100 years? She frowned. Maybe. I couldn't really say. It belonged to my great-great-grandmother. I found it in a chest in her house after she died. Your great-great-grandmother? Was she a fear? I blurted out. Oh, heavens, no, she replied. The wind blew her cap off, and her long hair swirled around her face. She brushed it back and bent to retrieve her cap. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean... She smiled at me. She had a pretty smile. I noticed her hazel eyes, shaped like cat eyes, and her creamy pale skin. She worked for the Fear family, she said, twisting the cap over her hair. What made you mention the Fears? I don't know, I replied. I didn't want to get into a whole thing about the amulet. Well, my great-great-grandmother was a housekeeper in the Fear mansion for many years, Melissa continued. I never thought about it, but maybe someone in the Fear family gave her this bracelet, as a present. She frowned again, although I've heard they weren't very generous people. She handed the silver bracelet back to me. Do you like it? Are you interested in buying it? The wind toppled a trash basket. Paper and other garbage blew down the aisle. The rain started to patter down harder. I studied the bracelet. Yes, maybe it once belonged to the Fear family. Maybe it had magical powers like the amulet. How much do you want for it? Dana asked Melissa. It's $100, she replied. I'll take off the tax and make it $100 even. She turned the baseball cap around to keep the rain off her face. A streak of lightning brightened the sky. I'd better start closing up, she said. She hurried to the other end of the table and started carrying the display cases to a nearby cart. I don't have $100, I told Dana. I searched my wallet. I only have $30. I only have change, Dana said. I guess we can't buy it. Hey, someone grabbed me from behind. I spun around and found Louis grinning at me. What's up, babe? I showed him the bracelet. I really want this, but I can't afford it. It's $100. Do you have any money? Money? What's money? I twirled the bracelet between my fingers. I really need this. Louis looked down the table. Where's the seller? Maybe we can make a deal, bargain. Melissa had disappeared. She's loading up her stuff. They're closing the flea market. I set the bracelet down on top of the display case. The blue jewels glowed even in the dim, darkening light. Let's get out of here, Louis said, taking my arm. Come on, Dana. Want to cruise around? See if anyone else is around? Three's a crowd, Dana said, waving and starting to jog toward the school. I'm going to go watch Clark practice for a while. I watched her run off, ducking her head against the rain. Then I followed Louis to his car, parked at the front of the school. I dropped into the front seat, shivering. I swept back my rain-wet hair with both hands. Louis lowered himself behind the wheel and grinned at me. Why are you grinning like that? I asked. He shrugged. Just grinning. He started the car and pulled it into the traffic of people leaving the flea market, fleeing the rain. What did you do today? I asked. Help my dad. He wanted to put in this electric garage door thing, to make it go up and down. We spent hours on it, but we couldn't get it to work. So what happened? He ran out of patience. He threw the controller on the concrete floor and stomped on it. Smashed it to bits, Louis snickered. You know my dad. He's about as patient as a pro wrestler. I settled back on the seat. Your dad does kind of look big and tough. He played hockey in college, Louis said, turning onto Main Street. He's always bragging about how he knocked a guy's teeth out. Awesome, I muttered. Hey, here, Louis said. He pulled something from his jacket pocket and shoved it in my hand. I got you a present. A present? I stared at it. The bracelet. Are you kidding me? I screamed. You stole it? He nodded, laughing. I got a 5-finger discount. But Louis, I sputtered, squeezing this bracelet in my hand. You can't do that. That's awful. That woman was really nice. You said you wanted it, he replied, eyes straight ahead. For an instant, I glimpsed something different in his eyes, something flat and cold, eyes I'd never seen before. Rain patted the windshield. We were driving through the old village, the oldest part of Shadyside. But that's not like you, I cried. Since when do you steal bracelets from people? It's the new me, he said. He braked for a red light. But, hey, you said you really wanted it, he said sharply. He took the bracelet from me and slipped it onto my wrist. The silver felt cool against my skin. The blue jewels gleamed dully in the light from the street lamp outside the car window. I stared at Louis. I didn't know what to say. The light changed, and he stepped on the gas pedal. Soon we were driving past farm country, empty fields, dark and bare. He clicked on the CD player. The new 50-cent CD burst from the speakers. He cranked it up until the sound boomed off the windows. I love just cruising, going nowhere, he said. I raised my arm and gazed at the bracelet. I brought it close to my face to study the jewels. And as I did, I heard a voice, just a whisper, but loud enough to be heard over the booming music. I'm here, Jamie. I'm still here. Chapter 13. Well, that totally freaked me out. The whispered words haunted me. I couldn't get them out of my head. I hid the bracelet in the back of my bottom dresser drawer, but that didn't help me get much sleep that night. Why did I want that bracelet so badly? What did I think it would do for me? I couldn't answer those questions, which made it all even scarier for me. I mean, what if it wasn't me who was so desperate to get her hands on the bracelet? What if it was Angelica Fear, still inside me, who made me desire it? Thinking that made me sick. My stomach knotted up. I couldn't eat, and I had the worst stomach ache. I needed to confide in someone, but Louis was so cheerful and up these days, I didn't want to bring him down. And Dana was hardly around. She was totally involved with Clark, going to his practices and hanging out with the team. I think she was more excited about the state tournament than Clark was. It was good to see Dana happy and excited, too. I mean, she'd had such a horrible year with her mother dying and her boyfriend back home drowning, and her father deciding he didn't want her and shipping her off to live with my family. So after all the horror we'd lived through, it was great to see Louis and Dana getting it all together and enjoying the rest of senior year. I didn't want to spoil things for them, but I just couldn't be happy like them. I couldn't forget the murders and the evil woman who came back to life and possessed me and forced me to kill my friends. How could you forget something like that? And I couldn't lose the feeling that Angelica was still around, still so close, watching me, waiting. Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep, so I got dressed and sneaked out of the house to join the night people. I walked into nights, greeted by the familiar aroma of beer and cigarette smoke. I kissed the brass plaque on the wall, waved to Ryland O'Connor, and spotted Louis sitting by himself in a booth against the back wall. I saw Aaron and Gaylin with the red-haired girl I didn't know. The two guys were arm wrestling. The girl kept rolling her eyes. She looked totally embarrassed. Then I saw Dana. She was in a booth at the side of the bar. I stopped. I couldn't help staring. I blinked, thinking maybe I was hallucinating or something, but no, she was sitting on Nate's lap, kissing him, running her hands through his hair. I turned away and strode the rest of the way to the back of the bar. Did you see Dana with Nate? I asked Louis, sliding across from him. He shrugged. Weird, huh? He was drinking a Diet Coke. He signaled Ryland to bring a beer for me. How are you doing, Jamie? Not bad, I lied. He looked down at my hands, clasped on the wooden table. Hey, where's the bracelet? You don't wear it. I put it away, I told him. It was kind of creepy, thinking maybe it was Angelica Fear's. It was on the tip of my tongue to tell him about the whispers I'd heard, but I held myself back. I thought that's why you wanted the bracelet, he said. I lowered my eyes. I don't know why I wanted it. You really shouldn't have stolen it. Maybe that makes it double bad luck. He laughed. Jamie, have you been superstitious your whole life? I didn't answer. I heard familiar voices, Nikki and Shark. I didn't realize they were in the next booth. Louis said something else, but I didn't hear. I was eavesdropping on Nikki and Shark. Nikki sat right behind me. She was talking about Candy and Ada and Whitney, how they'd been murdered. It's so totally weird, Nikki was saying. Those 3 girls who died, they were all Shadyside kids. No one at my school has died. Don't you see, Shark? It has to be some kind of bizarre curse on Shadyside High. Shark said something, but I didn't hear it. I looked up to see Dana standing at the side of our booth. She grabbed my hand and raised a finger to her lips with the other hand. Not a word of this, to Clark, okay? She whispered. I saw Nate standing at the front door to the bar, waiting for Dana. But I thought you were serious about Clark, I said. I am, Dana replied, but Nate is so cute. What can I do? She spun away and trotted to the front to meet Nate. They disappeared out the door. In the next booth, I heard Shark laugh. Whoa, Nate's big night. Didn't they break up? Nikki asked. Louis grabbed my shoulder to get my attention. Earth calling Jamie, he said. Are you still here? I don't think you heard a word I said. Sorry, I murmured. He was right. I hadn't been listening to him. I kept hearing Nikki's words repeating and repeating in my mind. A curse on Shadyside High. She couldn't be right, could she? It didn't take long to find out. The next afternoon, the curse struck again. Chapter 14. After school, I was packing up my backpack at my locker when Dana came running up to me. You aren't leaving, are you? I zipped the backpack shut. Yes, leaving, I said. That's what I usually do after school. Dana said something else, shouting over the loud voices in the crowded hall. I didn't hear her. I was watching a scene at the other end. Two girls held a boy by the arms while a third poured a bottle of water over his head. What is that about? I asked. Dana glanced over her shoulder as the boy grabbed the bottle away and began spraying it on the girls. She quickly turned back to me. Freshmen, she muttered. They're animals. Dana, what do you want? I wasn't in a good mood. Lewis and I had a dumb fight in the lunchroom. I couldn't even remember what it was about, and then I discovered I'd done all the wrong problems for my calc class. Dana tugged my arm. You can't go home, Jamie. You have to come to the gym. It's the team's last practice, before the tournament. No, I have my pottery class at the city center, I said, and I have to do my calc homework all over again. You have to come, Dana insisted. The guys need a big send-off. A lot of kids are there already. Come on, Jamie, do it for Clark, okay? Do it for Clark? What was Dana doing for Clark last night? Hooking up with Nate? Okay, I said. I glanced at my watch. I'll stay a short while. I guess I can be a little late for pottery. Excellent. She pulled me to the gym. See you in a minute. I've got to round up some others. I watched her run through the hall. Weird, I thought. Since when does Dana get excited about sports? Before Clark, I don't think she knew a baseball bat from a hockey stick. I pushed open the double doors to the gym. I was greeted by cheers from the bleachers and the thud of the basketball being dribbled up and down the court. Clark waved to me as he dribbled slowly to the foul line. He stopped and sent up a high floating jump shot. It hit the backboard and bounced off. One of his teammates grabbed the red rebound, dribbled around Clark, and passed to another player who made an easy layup. I hurried across the floor to the bleachers on the other side of the gym. I saw 20 or 30 kids spread out on the metal benches, cheering the team, talking and laughing. 4 guys were huddled together at the top. They were passing a big bag of potato chips back and forth, not paying much attention to the practice. Halfway up, I spotted Nate and Shark. Nikki sat one bench below. Shark kept messing up her hair, and she slapped his hand away. Aaron waved to me from the bottom bench. He sat with that girl I didn't know. I think she was a freshman. Shifting my backpack on my shoulders, I climbed up the stairs and slid in next to Nikki. Jamie, looking good, Shark said. He reached down and squeezed my shoulders. You look as awesome as I do. I can't believe you and I haven't hooked up yet. Shark, are you crazy? I cried. Get your hands off me. He tossed his head back and laughed. Nikki jumped up and pretended to strangle him. Shut up, Shark, she cried. You've been a total pain all afternoon, he giggled. Nikki, red-faced, dropped back onto the bench. Ignore him, she muttered. He thinks he's cute. How'd you get here so early from Waynesbridge? I asked. They had to close the school, she said. The furnace conked out. It was freezing. I couldn't hear my teachers because everyone's teeth was chattering. I laughed. Nikki had a great sense of humor. Some cheers went up around us. One of the players must have done something good. I realized we weren't paying any attention to the practice. I turned back to the floor. Clark caught a pass and jumped high with an easy layup. More cheers. I saw Dana step into the gym. She stayed with her back against the double doors, her eyes on Clark. I felt a sudden chill. I shut my eyes. The sound of the basketball thudding the hardwood floor grew louder in my ears. Whoa, I suddenly felt so weird. My neck muscles tightened. I felt chill after chill ooze down my neck. I opened my eyes. The colors in the gym were all wrong. The players were all bright blue and red. The walls turned black. What is happening to me? I had the most powerful feeling of dread. I jumped to my feet. I had to get away from there. I didn't know why. I just knew I had to hurry. I saw Dana at the gym doors. The floor tilted one way, then the other as I tripped down the bleacher steps. I made it to the gym floor. Wave after wave of dizziness rolled over me. I held both arms out to steady myself. The players raced past me in a blur of blue and red. Wrong colors. Everything was wrong. And then it lifted, as quickly as it had come over me. The bright white gym lights returned. The walls shimmered white again. I felt my muscles loosen and relax. What was that about? Still walking unsteadily, I crossed the floor to Dana. I wanted to tell her I didn't feel well. I had to go home. I was halfway across the floor when I heard a loud metallic crack. I heard a girl's cry. Then another cracking sound, louder this time, a frightening crunch, and then a rumbling noise quickly drowned out my shrill scream. With a gasp, I whipped around. I saw kids jumping up. Hands flew up in the air. Kids were diving and stumbling and falling, screams and cries. I saw the potato chip bag sailed down over the seats. The whole world appeared to shake. The rumbling noise grew deafening until I covered my ears and opened my mouth in scream after scream as I realized the bleachers were collapsing. Chapter 15. Screams rose over the cracking crash of the falling metal. I watched helplessly as the 4 guys toppled backward off the top of the bleachers. Help me! Look out! What is happening? Please help! The panicking shouts forced me from my stupor. I darted forward to help and saw the guy on the team running in front of me. Clark and another kid had Nate by the arms. They were bent over the fallen benches, tugging him gently, all 3 of them talking at once. Nate grimaced, his eyes shut, his face twisted in pain. The 2 boys freed Nate from the wreckage. He shook himself and staggered forward. My ankle, he choked. I think it's broken. Aaron and the freshman girl had been on the bottom bench. They jumped away when the bleachers started to collapse. Now they were working together, pulling kids out. Kids were scattered all over the gym, sprawling on their backs, huddled in small groups. Kids who were safe were crying and hugging one another. Shark, where are you? I called, finally finding my voice, but my words were drowned out by the shouts and cries from all around. Shark! The benches had crunched together. It looked like a ragged mountain of metal. I grabbed onto the edge of a low bench and started to pull myself up the bleachers. I saw Shark above me, on his knees, waving to me. Are you okay? I shouted, cupping my hands around my mouth. Yeah, help me down, he replied. I'm dizzy, I guess. I feel shaky. I took his hand and started to guide him down to the floor, a curse on Shadyside High. Nikki's words suddenly came back to me. I heard sirens outside. Someone had called 911. Help was on the way. As everyone out, Coach Murphy was shouting, running frantically back and forth in front of the fallen bleachers. Did everyone get out safe? Shark grabbed my arm. Nikki, he cried. I searched the gym floor. I didn't see her. Nikki! Nikki! Shark ran back to the bleachers, shouting her name. Nikki, where are you? I saw her before he did. My hand shot up to my mouth to stop my scream. I stared down into the bent metal, stared at Nikki squeezed under the benches, her arms pressed to her sides. Nikki! Nikki! I heard Shark's shouts somewhere to my left. I started to wave frantically, but I couldn't speak. I could only wave, my whole body trembling, and stare down at Nikki. Her face crushed beneath the metal bench, her face crushed and broken. Her skull smashed in, blood running down her blonde hair, one eyeball hanging loose. Nikki, crushed and broken, and dead. Part 3. Chapter 16. 3 days later, a dreary cold afternoon, storm clouds low in the sky. Dana and I were driving home after Nikki's funeral. It was held in a small chapel in Waynesbridge, too small for all the kids who showed up. A lot of us had to mill outside, unable to squeeze in for the ceremony. We huddled together in the parking lot. It was totally awkward. No one knew what to say. Now I was glad Dana was driving because I couldn't stop crying. I didn't even know Nikki that well, but the horror of her death wouldn't leave me. They should have held it in a bigger place, Dana said, turning into a Wendy's. You know, a big church or something. I wiped my eyes. I was down to my last Kleenex. Why are you turning in here? I thought we'd get something to eat. Isn't that what people do after funerals? They eat? I sighed. My stomach felt as if it were filled with heavy rocks, but I followed her into the restaurant. Dana ordered for both of us. It wasn't very crowded. 2 little kids with their mother at one table. The kids were arguing over whose bag held the most French fries. I found a booth at the back. I still had tears running down my cheeks. I pulled a few napkins from the dispenser and dried my tears. Nikki's mother looked like she wouldn't survive the funeral, Dana said. She couldn't stop sobbing. I guess she's all alone now. Nikki's dad lives in Florida, I think. She unwrapped a cheeseburger and took a big bite. I struggled to pull the paper off my straw. Poor Shark, Dana murmured. That's 2 for him, you realize? I squinted at her. 2? Huh? 2 girlfriends, Dana said. First Candy died, then Nikki. I stared at her. I hadn't even thought of that. She unwrapped my cheeseburger. Jamie, you haven't eaten a thing all day. I watched you sit there at breakfast. Come on, try to take a few bites. I punched the straw through the lid on the Coke and took a sip. It isn't a curse on Shadyside High, I said softly. Nikki was wrong. Dana tapped my hand. What are you saying? Are you talking to yourself? I don't get you. Nikki said it was a curse on our school, I explained. All the horrifying deaths. She said it was a curse on Shadyside, but the tears came again. I just couldn't stop crying. But she was wrong, I said finally. Nikki didn't go to Shadyside, so you see, Dana, it's something much worse. Dana's eyes went wide. She dropped her cheeseburger onto its paper. Oh my God, she cried. I gasped. Dana, are you all right? Oh my God, she repeated. She locked her eyes on mine. She suddenly looked totally pale. Dana? The brain is so weird, she said. I just remembered something. I mean, it flashed into my brain like from out of nowhere, but it must have been in there this whole time. You're not making a lot of sense, I said. Why don't you take a deep breath and... No, I'm making sense, she insisted. I just remembered something that happened in your garage, Jamie. That night I faced Angelica Fear. Oh, What happened? Dana covered her mouth with one hand. Oh, wow. It just came back to me. I must have shoved it away because it was so frightening. What? I demanded. What is it? Dana locked her dark eyes on me again. Angelica told me why she was killing everyone. She told me, Jamie. She said she came back to life because she wanted to kill all the kids who went inside the Fear Mansion before it was torn down. All the kids who discovered her secret room. Dana took a deep breath. She said the kids who found her secret room looted it. They took her possessions, and now she planned to kill them all. I shuddered again. I realized I'd stopped breathing the whole time Dana was talking. Now I let my breath out in a long whoosh. Dana, I whispered, we all were there. Louis and Shark and Nate and me and we all were there that night. We all took things. Every one of us. Her mouth dropped open. She didn't reply. My mind was spinning. The bright lights in the restaurant shimmered in my eyes. I shut them, struggling to think clearly. Angelica Fear must still be around, I murmured. She killed Nikki. Nikki was there that night. Ada, Whitney, everyone who died. They were there that night. They stole stuff from Angelica's secret room. I opened my eyes. Oh, wow, Dana, don't you see? Angelica's still around, and she wants to kill the rest of us. We're all in horrible danger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. The clock on my bed table said 1:13. Angelica is going to kill us all, I thought, hugging myself, and I'm the only one who knows it. I climbed to my feet. I have to find her. I have to stop her somehow. I crept across my room, stepping through a pool of pale moonlight on the floor. My hands trembling, I slid open the bottom dresser drawer. I fumbled around in the back until I found the bracelet. Then I slipped it over my right wrist. Angelica, are you here? I whispered. Are you here? Chapter 17. Silence. A silence that rang in my ears. No reply from Angelica. I shivered. Was she there in my room, watching me, teasing me by not answering? I knew I couldn't sleep. Maybe I'd never sleep again. I pulled on jeans and a couple of sweaters, then I sneaked downstairs out of the house and began walking through the chilled darkness to nights. Louis will cheer me up, I told myself. Louis will hold me and assure me that I'm okay, that we're not all in some kind of horrifying nightmare, that no 100-year-old ghost plans to kill us all. My heart was pounding by the time I turned onto Fear Street. My breath puffed up in front of me. The world seemed even more still than usual. Nothing moved, not a blade of grass on the dew-crusted lawns, not even the few leaves left hanging on the trees. Silence. My throat suddenly ached. I started to jog faster. I needed the warmth of the bar, the friendly faces, Louis. The silver bracelet bounced on my wrist. I jammed my icy hands into my parka pockets. Squinting into the gray dimness, I watched for the lights of the Fear Street Acres shopping center. To my surprise, I saw only darkness up ahead. My first thought, it must be foggier than I realized. The lights must be hidden behind the thick fog. My second thought, has a power blackout turned off all the lights? I jogged across the street, then stopped. No lights on at nights. Had Ryland closed up tonight? A wave of panic swept over me. I spun around. No streetlights behind me. No glow of red or green from the traffic light at Fear and Walker. Whoa, where is the bar? I took a deep, shuddering breath and moved forward. Hey, anyone here? I shouted. Anyone? My voice came out high and shrill. I let out a gasp as I realized I was staring up at a dark hill, a steeply sloping lawn, stretching all gray and black under the pale silver sliver of moonlight. I'm on the wrong block, I decided. I made a wrong turn. But no, I turned back and glimpsed the tilted street sign at the corner. Fear Street. Yes, here I was. But the lights, the shopping center, the bar. All darkness. Shadows swaying over the sloping lawn. And at the top of the hill, an enormous house, all blacks and purples, hunkering up there like a giant animal about to pounce. The slanted roofs, the twin chimneys on either side, rising beside castle-like turrets, the balconies and terraces. Of course I recognized it. Of course I knew what house I was staring at in such trembling horror. But how could I believe it? How could I believe my own eyes? For I was staring up at the Fear Mansion, the house that was torn down nearly 2 years ago. I had been there that day. Louis and I had watched it come down. All of the old mansions on Fear Street were destroyed, blown up, knocked down, and carted away to make way for the shopping center. But now I stood at the bottom of the lawn, my hands jammed in my pockets, my body shuddering in disbelief, gazing up at the mansion. Not a burned-out shell as I remembered it, but tall and whole, and it must have looked 100 years old. No, it can't be, I stammered out loud, and then I cut my hands around my mouth and started to shout. Is anybody here? Can anybody help me? No reply. And then I felt the push at my back, the strong push forcing me up the hill, my shoes slipping on the frosted ground, the tall grass matted down and frozen. I felt something or someone pushing me to the house. I opened my mouth to cry once again for help, but this time no sound came out. My breath caught in my throat. My heart seemed to leap in my chest. Something drew me forward, pushed me, tugged me toward that old house. The old house that couldn't be there. Was it some kind of evil fear magic? Was this Angelica's revenge? I couldn't breathe. I straightened my legs, tightened my muscles, pushed my heels into the hard ground, struggled to resist, to fight back against the invisible force. But now the wide columns of the front porch loomed over me, and the thick wood of the double front doors creaked as the doors slowly swung open. Beyond them, I saw eerie green light, thick and foggy, a billowing light. Closer, closer. No, please. Please, I finally found my voice. Help me, somebody, stop, please. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't stop myself. Somebody, please. A strong push sent me stumbling inside. The heavy door slammed hard behind me. Chapter 18. The slam of the door echoed like thunder through the enormous house. I heard wave after wave of sound, as if I were standing at the ocean shore. I took a deep breath and tried to stop my shivering. The air inside the house carried a heavy chill, colder than the air outside. I gasped as I felt a stab of cold on my skin, as if an icy hand had gripped the back of my neck. The green fog swirled around me, billowing thickly, rising and falling. Beyond it, I could see what appeared to be a couch and chairs, dark, heavy furniture arranged in front of a dead fireplace. I turned to the door, eager to escape, but I could no longer see it through the heavy green snakes of fog. Dark doorways seemed to pop up around me, doorway after doorway, until I shut my eyes, wishing them to disappear. I stumbled forward, bumping my knee on a low ottoman. "Oh!" I cried out, grabbing the back of a leather couch to keep me from falling. The furniture felt real, heavy and solid, but how could it be real? How could I be standing in the Fear Mansion 2 years after it had been torn down? Gripping the back of the couch, I held my breath and listened. Did I hear the soft shuffle of shoes on carpet? Was someone in here with me? Angelica Fear? No! I uttered a low cry, pushed myself away from the couch, bolted forward into the nearest doorway, and found myself in a library, dark books shelved from floor to ceiling on all sides. Where is the front door? I spun away and hurled myself through the next door. It opened onto a long, narrow hall, completely black. I could hear the rush of wind through the passageway, or was that my own shallow breathing? I knew I had to get out of that house before I went totally crazy. I had to find the front door, or any door that would lead to escape. I darted back into the swirling curtains of green mist. The fog circled me, held me prisoner, spun me around until I stumbled into total dizziness. Finally, gathering all my strength, I lowered my shoulders, ducked my head, and burst forward, breaking through the mist, breaking free. But where was I now? In another entryway, surrounded by dark, empty doorways? And is anyone here? Is anyone here? I didn't even realize I was crying out. My voice came out hollow and dull and echoed off the walls. Anyone here? I darted frantically from door to door, peering into dark, empty rooms, and then a flickering orange light caught my eye. I stopped, my heart pounding, and crept to the doorway. Another library? Or was it the same one I'd seen before? My gaze fell over a wall of dark books. 2 brown leather couches facing each other, a long table stacked with papers. I raised my eyes to the wide stone fireplace. The flickering light came from a log fire crackling quietly. I squinted into the dancing flames. I realized I was staring at a fire in a house that didn't exist. I took a step back. My mind whirred. This was too weird. No matter how much I struggled, there was no way I could make sense of it. And then I saw something move. A man? He stood up slowly from the couch. He had his back to me, outlined in the flickering flames. He wore a dark suit. His hair was long. I grabbed the door frame, unable to move, unable to breathe. He turned slowly, and his face came into view. I saw dark eyes, a slender, weary face, and I recognized him. Yes, I recognized him at once. Chapter 19. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hide. I wanted to shut my eyes and wake up in my own bed, far away from this nightmare. But there I stood, my whole body trembling, afraid to breathe, afraid to make a sound. There I stood, gazing at the dark figure in front of the fire, staring at Simon Fear. Yes, I recognized him from the bronze plaque on the wall at nights, and I knew him from a dozen old photographs I'd seen while studying the Fear family. Of course he'd been dead for nearly 100 years. Of course this house had been destroyed, replaced by the bar my friends and I hung out in and the shopping center around it. Of course. In my terror, I couldn't try to reason this out. My mind was frozen now, frozen in horror. I had only one thought, to escape. To get out of that house before he saw me. I watched him step toward the fire. He held out his hands to the flames. With a sharp intake of breath, I spun away from the doorway and started to run. My shoes thudded on the hard wood, echoing loudly down the long halls, but I didn't care. I had to run. I had to find a way out. And there they were, the double front doors, one of them still open a crack. I took off, running full speed now, my sides aching, my chest about to burst. Out the door, onto the porch, into the cold, fresh air. I didn't slow my pace, slipping and sliding on the frosty ground. I tore down the hill and kept running. I was nearly a block away when I turned and glanced back. The house still rose up darkly over the hill, and in one window I could see the blinking yellow firelight. Louis. I said his name out loud as I started to jog toward his house. Louis was the only one who would understand, the only one who would believe me. Normally I'd look for him at nights, but there was no nights. The world had gone back in time. The world had gone crazy. The world had turned into a nightmare, and I knew Louis was the only one I could turn to. His new house was nearly a mile away. I wanted to go home and get the car, but I was afraid of waking my parents, so I half jogged, half ran the whole way. Through the still night, the house is dark, no cars in the street. About a block from Lewis's house, I saw headlights sweep over the street. A patrol car rolled slowly across the intersection. I sank back, pressing up against a hedge, eager not to be seen. Try explaining my night to a cop. You see, officer, the Fear Mansion suddenly came back, and I went inside and, yeah, sure. I waited until the patrol car was out of sight. Then I pushed away from the hedge and, walking now, made my way to Lewis's house. The front of the house was dark, but I saw orange light seeping from under the blinds in the last window, Lewis's room. I hurried up to the window. The new sod had just been put down, and chunks of it were still loose. I grabbed onto the window sill and tapped my fist against the glass. I waited, then tapped again. Come on, Louis. Come on, I need you. After a minute or two, the blinds pulled up. Louis peered out at me, surprise on his face. His hair matted to his forehead. He pulled open the window. Jamie, what's wrong? Plenty, I said. Please let me in. I have to talk to you. He brushed back his hair, blinking himself awake. Then he slid the window open further. He reached out, grabbed me under the arms, and helped pull me into his room. I found my balance, but didn't let go of him. I wrapped my arms around his t-shirt and held on tight, pressing my cheek against his. Hey, you're cold, I said. Have you been outside? He shook his head. No, I was asleep. He straightened his shirt collar. What's wrong, Jamie? What are you doing here? I just blurted out. The Fear Mansion is back. I held onto his hands. They were both cold, too. He narrowed his eyes at me. Excuse me? I don't get it. It's back, I repeated. Believe me. Please believe me, Louis. My voice broke. I threw my arms around him again and hugged him. We stood there like that for a long time. Then he led me over to his bed, and we sat side by side, holding hands. Start at the beginning, he said softly. It's not a long story, I said. I couldn't sleep, so I walked to nights. I thought maybe you'd be there, but everything was dark, Louis. I mean, the words caught in my throat. I swallowed and started again. Fear Street Acres. It was gone. Nights, too. It was all dark, and the old hill was back. And the house, the Fear Mansion, it was back, and I went inside. I mean, something pulled me in, and... Whoa, wait. He put his fingers over my lips to silence me. Look at you, he said. You're a total mess. You're out of breath, and... He stared hard at me. Did you run all the way here? You're not listening to me, I screamed. Don't you hear what I'm telling you? The Fear Mansion is back, and inside it I saw Simon Fear. He squeezed my hands. He slid the bracelet back and forth on my wrist. I'm worried about you, he murmured, avoiding my eyes. Maybe we should call your parents or something. No, Louis, please, I pleaded. Shh. Again, he placed a finger gently over my mouth. Calm. Take a deep breath, Jamie. And listen to what you're telling me. You know the Fear Mansion can't be back. It's impossible. No way you could go inside a house that was knocked down. He let go of the bracelet. You and I watched them knock it down, remember? I pulled free of him and jumped to my feet. I'm not crazy, I screamed. He jumped up beside me. You'll wake my parents. Just keep it down, okay? I'm not crazy, I repeated, lowering my voice. I'll prove it to you. Huh? Prove that the Fear Mansion is back? He reached for me, but I backed away. You've been totally stressed out, Jamie, he said. I'm really worried. I think you need help now. Get dressed, I said. He squinted at me. Get dressed. I'll take you there, I said. You can see with your own eyes. Then maybe you'll believe me. A chill ran down my back. I hadn't removed my parka. I burrowed inside it and shoved my hands deep into the pockets. A few minutes later, we silently backed Louis's mother's car out of the garage and down to the street. We climbed in and started the engine, but we didn't turn on the headlights until we were in the next block. We learned a lot about sneaking out during our 2 years of going to nights. We were experts. So far, none of us had been caught. Our parents were all clueless. Louis and I drove to Fear Street in silence. He tapped his fingers on the wheel and kept his eyes straight ahead. I hit the passenger door when he swerved to avoid a trash can that had rolled into the street. You okay? He asked, straightening the wheel. Yeah, okay, I said. He had the heater up full blast and the hot air felt good against my face. Louis, it's back, I said, gazing out into the darkness. I don't know how or why, but it's back. It's some kind of evil magic from Angelica Fear. I know it. I'm not crazy. He let out a long sigh. I want to believe you. I really do, he said, but his voice trailed off. He slowed the car. He pointed out the windshield. I followed his gaze and saw the lights up ahead, white pinpricks against the night sky. The lights grew brighter as the car approached the store windows sharpened into focus, the windows of Fear Street Acres. Louis pulled the car to the curb and stopped. We both stared out at Knight's bar. Oh, a muffled cry escaped my lips, and then I collapsed, just broke down, and started to cry. It's okay, Louis whispered. He put his arms around me and drew me to him. It's okay, Jamie. It'll all be okay. He held me and let me cry on his shoulder. It's okay, he repeated. I'll take care of you. I really will. Chapter 20. Well, that was an adventure last night. The poor girl had quite a fright. Imagine seeing a house that had been gone for 2 years, being forced inside by some invisible hand, and most frightening of all, setting eyes on Simon Fear. Dear dead Simon. Dear dead me. Jamie was so busy obsessing about Angelica she never guessed it was me all along. She doesn't know that I am young and alive again, having my fun messing with Jamie's mind, as they say today. She's in my power now. It was so easy to arrange, almost too easy. The power, of course, is in the bracelet. Did she really think I stole it for her just to please her? It was so easy to have her find that bracelet in the flea market. She has no idea of its power, no idea of how I can use it to control her mind, her actions, her whole world. She's terribly frightened and confused now, and of course she blames Angelica. Fine, fine. The more she blames my poor dead wife, the further away she'll be from the truth. It's a laugh, isn't it? But I think I've had enough fun teasing Jamie. I have serious work to do. Time for the blood to flow. I won't rest until the blood flows and my revenge is complete. Now she will meet the real Fear. Part 4. Chapter 21. Louis, what are you smiling about? I asked. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. His smile grew wider. It's a secret smile, he said. The houses of Shadyside gave way to woods, then wide, empty farm fields. Through the car window I could see the tiny dots of white stars in the purple-black sky, a clear, cold night. I smoothed my gloved hand over Louis's coat sleeve. Are you keeping secrets from me? Plenty, he replied. That's why it's a secret smile. I gave him a gentle shove. You're weird tonight. His smile faded. This whole night is weird. A bonfire at Miller's farm in March. It's a pep rally, I said. Isn't it a little cold for a pep rally? He swerved around a dead raccoon in the highway. You're such a wimp, I said. I pinched his cheek. Afraid your little toesies will get cold? He grabbed my glove and squeezed it. Will you warm them up for me later? I pulled my hand back to my lap. Maybe. Why can't they have the pep rally in May or June, he asked. Because there's no basketball tournament in May or June. Duh. The heater in his mom's car wasn't sending out much hot air. I pulled my wool ski cap down further on my head. You know this is kind of exciting, I said. I mean, Shadyside hasn't gone to the tournament in years. That's why we've never had a winter pep rally. An arrow-shaped wooden sign read, Miller's Farm. Louis turned the car onto a long gravel drive. The tires skidded on the slick gravel. Up ahead, I could see rows of cars and SUVs parked on the grass. Torches on long poles sent up flames of yellow-orange light. The torches led to a field in front of the barn, where lots of kids had already gathered. Louis slowed the car and pulled it up beside the last parked car. What's up with your cousin Dana? Louis said. She's totally psyched about this. I nodded. Dana the cheerleader, I said. Can you believe that? I pushed open the passenger door, climbed out, and took a deep breath of the cold, fresh air. I could smell straw and grass and cows and dirt, farm smells. My cousin Cindy lived on a farm outside Shadyside when we were little kids. I used to stay with her every summer. She flashed into my mind as I started toward the field. I had this picture of the two of us running through the cornfields late at night, a big full moon hanging right over our heads. Hey, Jamie! Dana's shout interrupted my thoughts. She came running up to us, her coat open and flapping behind her as she ran. I've been calling you. Didn't you hear me? Dana, hi, I said. What's up? Check it out. Dana pointed to the pile of wood and straw stretching up as high as the barn roof. We've been building the bonfire all afternoon, she said. Look at me. I'm covered in dust and dirt. She wiped her forehead with the back of one hand. It's going to be an awesome fire, she said, taking me by the arm and pulling me toward the field. Hey, I'm here too, Lewis said, running to my other side and taking my other arm. The ground crunched beneath our shoes. A strong gust of wind flattened the tall grass and made a soft whistling sound. I heard kids singing an old U2 song. 2 boys were wrestling on the ground in front of the bonfire pile, and a crowd gathered to watch. Some coaches hurried to break it up, but it wasn't a fight. The guys were just goofing. We were nearing the end of the parking lot when I saw Gaylin and Aaron. They stood between 2 SUVs. Aaron had a brown paper bag in his hand. He passed it to Gaylin. Hey, Jamie, Gaylin called, waving us over. Wine? Lewis laughed. You guys got wine? He took the paper bag from Aaron and sniffed it. My parents weren't home, Gaylin said. They won't miss it. Lewis handed me the bottle. I took a taste, some kind of red wine. It felt very warm and soothing as it went down. Dana glanced around nervously. You guys could get suspended for this, you know. Aaron tilted the bottle to his mouth and drank. It's cold, Gaylin said, grinning at Dana. We're just trying to stay warm. The fire will warm you up, Dana said. It's going to be enormous, she pointed. We found all these old rotting boards inside the barn. They're going to burn like crazy. Hey, there's Lisa, Aaron said. He tossed the paper bag to Gaylin and took off, running to greet the red-haired girl I'd seen with him before. Aaron's in love, Gaylin said, snickering. He finished the bottle and tossed it under the SUV. Who is she? I asked. Where's she from? Gaylin shrugged. Mars, I think. Dana pulled me away. Come on, guys, it's going to start. Gaylin grinned at Dana. Where's your cheerleader outfit? Hope you're not making fun of me, Dana shot back, because I can take you, Gaylin. She shook a fist at him. Gaylin squinted at her, trying to focus. I could see he'd drunk a lot of wine. He tottered a little as he stepped up to Dana. You want a piece of me? Want to take this outside? Lewis pulled him back. We're already outside, dude. Oh, yeah, he turned to Dana. Want to kiss and make up? Dana made a disgusted face. Kiss you? Are you crazy? She took off, running toward the circle of kids in front of the barn. Gaylin squinted at me. Was that a no? We made our way past tall bales of straw piled up in bunches of 3 and 4. Another wind gust sent dust and bits of straw swirling in the air. I saw Nate and Shark at the back of the circle. Shark was perched on a low straw bale. Nate leaned against it, talking rapidly to Shark, moving his hands as he talked. Shark laughed and tossed a handful of straw in Nate's face. One of the coaches stepped up to the portable microphone system. In the darting light from the torches, I couldn't see who it was. I gazed up at the tower ready for the bonfire, along with tons of lumber and newspapers and sticks and straws. Old chairs and a beat-up wreck of a couch had been tossed on the pile. The tower must have been 20 or 30 feet tall, taller than the barn. How did they ever build it? I wondered. It will make an amazing fire, I thought. The wind gusts made a rattling sound as they blew against the tall pile. Behind us, the barn doors creaked. A wall of straw bales stood against the barn. From somewhere behind the barn, I heard the low hoot-hoot of a barn owl. Lewis slid his arm around my shoulders. We huddled close together at the back of the circle and watched. Coach Murphy struggled to get everyone quiet. Finally, he started to give a short speech. The loudspeaker kept squealing, and no one seemed to be able to stop it. Finally, the coach tossed the mic down in disgust and shouted his talk. Then the cheerleading squad ran into the middle of the circle and led everyone in 4 or 5 cheers. Tigers roar! Tigers roar! Tigers roar! Tigers score! At first, only a few kids joined in, but after a few cheers, everyone forgot about being cool and started to get into the spirit of the thing. Lewis and I aren't rah-rah types, especially since we're older than everyone. We would have graduated last year if it hadn't been for our accident, but we started cheering too. Dana was jumping up and down. She cheered the loudest when Clark was introduced. Clark brought a basketball and he tossed it high into the crowd. That got a game going as kids started heaving the ball back and forth across the circle. Lots of laughing and kidding around. Someone broke into a totally obscene version of the school fight song and everyone joined in. Coach Murphy waved his hands and shouted, trying to get the singing to stop. Finally, kids began chanting, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" The cheerleaders dipped torches in buckets of kerosene and lit them. They stood in a line, holding the flaming torches high. The wind made the flames dance and shimmy. Lewis tapped me on the shoulder. "They're selling hot cider over there." He pointed to a table near the barn entrance. "I'm going to get a cup. You want some?" "Sure," I said. "Thanks." He trotted off toward the barn. I turned back to the cheerleaders with their flaming torches. "Everybody back 5 steps. Back 5 steps," Coach Murphy shouted. "This fire is going to rock," Dana declared. "Go Tigers!" some kids yelled. "Burn the Red Hawks!" Burn the Red Hawks! Burn the Red Hawks! The chant spread quickly around the circle. Back 5 paces, Coach Murphy bellowed. We all obediently moved back across the wet grass. And then a hush fell over the crowd as the cheerleaders formed a circle around the tall tower. They lowered their torches and set the pile ablaze on all sides at once. A cheer rose up over the field as the wood flamed up, slowly at first, and then crackling flames climbed up the sides. The old couch caught. Big tufts of straw lit up, tossing in the wind. The fire shot up the tall structure, rising like a rocket, crackling, popping, darting out in all directions. It's beautiful, Dana declared, slapping me a hard high five. I had to agree with her. I'd never seen such an awesome column of bright fire rising up to the sky. It looked like some kind of movie special effects. And just as I thought that, I saw the tower start to tilt. My mouth dropped open as the tower bent, then toppled over. I pressed my hands to my face, unable to scream. With a rumble that sounded like thunder, the flaming straw and boards and chairs and chunks of wood came falling over everyone, the flames leaping out, shooting over the ground. Screams rose up over the roar of the fire. I saw kids running, their coats on fire, rolling in the dew-wet grass. Balls of red-yellow fire bounced over the ground like Clark's basketball. The fireballs fell from the sky, bouncing over the hard ground. I saw a bell of straw catch flame, and then another, and now the structure had completely fallen and lay across the field, flaming, shooting up streaks of fire, spreading over the field a hot, burning wall of dancing flame. I grabbed Dana, who stared straight ahead, frozen in shock. The two of us tumbled back as blast after blast of heat washed over us. I let out a cry when I saw the barn catch in a fiery whoosh of flame, so loud it sounded like an explosion, and now the barn roof burned, sending up another high wall of leaping flames, and fire burst from the front wall of the barn. It all went up so fast. The barn, the bales of straw, the lumber, and I saw the owls flying from the barn. The owls with their wings on fire. Flames darted over their backs as they flapped up against the night sky, screeching out their pain. The owls are burning, someone screamed. The owls are burning. I turned away and covered my ears. I couldn't bear to watch. Lewis, I called. I wanted him to hold me, but I didn't see him. Dana held on to my sleeve. Lewis, where is he? She gazed behind me, then turned and glanced around. Lewis, I repeated, my eyes searching the faces of fleeing, screaming kids, faces so bright and unnatural, so horrifyingly bright, surrounded by the walls of fire. Where is he? Dana repeated, not letting go of me. He went to get cider, I managed to say. Over there, by the barn. I couldn't see the cider table. Was it that thing on fire by the barn door? Did Lewis get trapped in the fire? Lewis! I pulled free of Dana's grasp and took off, running to the flames, cupping my hands around my mouth and screaming the whole way, Lewis! Lewis! Chapter 22. Lewis! Lewis! My screams were drowned out by the shrieks and wails of other terrified kids. We all seemed to be running in frantic circles, calling out one another's names, shouting for help as the flames shot out, attacked, pulled back, and spread. Lewis! Someone bumped me hard from behind, and I fell to my knees. I pulled myself up quickly. Kids ran past me, stampeding to safety. A deafening explosion of sound swept over me, making the ground shake. I saw the barn roof collapse under a roaring wall of flames. Hey, Jamie! Shark grabbed my arm. His eyes were wide, and I could see fire reflected in them. You okay? I nodded. Shark, have you seen Lewis? I asked, my voice high and shrill. I can't find Lewis. I shivered. Despite the cold of the night, sweat poured down my forehead. Shark shook his head. He looked dazed. Nate was right next to me, he said. And Aaron and Gaylin and that girl, have you seen them? Where did they go? I don't know, I said. I'm looking for Lewis. He went over by the barn and... I stopped, outlined by orange flames. I saw Lewis running toward us. Over here, I screamed. Over here! I ran to him, hugged him, pressed his hot face against mine. You're okay? He nodded, brushing back his hair. I was at the side of the barn when the tower fell. I just took off like a shot. I knew the barn would catch. I was worried, I said, holding on to him. Where did you run? Why didn't you run back to me? I was helping the cheerleaders, Lewis said. They were standing right under the tower when it fell. One of them got burned pretty bad. Kristen, Blake, I think the rest are okay. I heard this rise and saw a fall of sirens in the distance. Someone must have called 911. There's Nate over there with Coach Murphy, Shark said. He grabbed Lewis's arm. Did you see Aaron? Gaylin? Were they over by the barn? Lewis shook his head. I don't know. Let's go look for them. We took off, jogging together. The wind blew thick, black smoke over us. I tried to cover my eyes, but the smoke burned my nostrils and choked my throat. All three of us started to cough. I turned my back against the wind. The flames covered the barn now, leaping high into the night sky, making the ground as bright as day. Sirens blaring, red lights flashing on their roofs. Ambulance rolled out onto the grass, followed by a line of fire trucks. The shrill sirens competed with screams and cries. Shielding my eyes, I spun around. The whole field appeared to be on fire. Blades of burning straw floated in the air, carried on the smoke-filled wind. More ambulances and fire trucks rumbled onto the grass. Near the gravel drive, I spotted Clark and Dana. Clark had his arm around her shoulders. Her dark hair was blowing wild above her face. The two of them stood motionless, staring at the fiery horror on the farm field. Aaron, Gaylin, Shark shouted their names. Dozens of kids were running to the parking lot, escaping. Some ran with cell phones to their ears, probably calling home, telling their parents what had happened, and that they were okay. The field was emptying out. Shark, Lewis, and I ducked low and darted between two flaming bales of straw. The blast of heat made my skin burn. Aaron, Gaylin! I had to close my eyes because of another thick cloud of smoke. Lewis held my arm and pulled me over the grass. When I opened my eyes, I saw that we were nearly to the fence at the end of the field. The sirens and shouts and voices were far behind us. I blinked. Two shadowy forms up ahead didn't move. Scarecrows? Why would the farm have scarecrows up in an empty field at the end of winter? Oh, no. Lewis muttered. I heard the fear in his voice. No. Oh, no. The scarecrows tilted on tall poles. The three of us ducked through the fence and made our way closer. Oh! A soft cry escaped my throat, and I grabbed Lewis's arm. I stared at the two figures dangling on the poles. Not scarecrows. Not scarecrows. Aaron and Gaylin tilting each toward each other, hanging limp and lifeless on the poles, their mouths and ears, their shirts and pants stuffed with straw.